Hello everybody, hope you're doing well and thanks for joining us for another video, which today is regarding the upcoming final experiment trip to Antarctica in just a few weeks' time. If you're unfamiliar with the final experiment, I have already done some videos detailing its purpose, which I'll link down below, but essentially I think it's now like 9 people, some flat earthers and some globers, who are all going together to Antarctica for 4 days in December to document if there is a 24-hour sun like the globe predicts or not. Now, I said in my first video about TFE that I would do some updates closer to the time about where things stand. And I've had quite a few people not only asking about updates, but also interested in the gear that I'll be taking and how I feel about the whole thing, emotions and such. Currently, there are a few last bits of gear that I'm sorting out, so I'll try and get another update done before we go to cover all of that. But for now, I'll give you guys an update on where things stand currently and my feelings regarding TFE. Actually, my feelings and emotions about TFE have changed quite a lot over the past few months. When I first heard about it, there were some videos on the TFE channel already saying that the proposed experiment would include 24 flat earthers and 24 globers all working together, that I was one of the 48 invited to participate, and that it would revolve around Antarctica in the 24-hour sun. But that was about it. All the videos up to that point were anonymous, so I didn't know any specifics about who was proposing it, or indeed what they were really proposing. So when I then had people asking if I was going to participate, I couldn't really answer because I didn't know what I'd be agreeing to do. For all I knew, it could have been someone offering to pay for all 48 of us to go to Antarctica, which seems unlikely. Or it could have been someone saying, hey, why don't we all pay for ourselves to go? Which for most people, including myself, probably would have been unfeasible. So my first feelings about TFE were skepticism. Probably not helped by the fact that one of the videos wound up being published on April Fool's Day. At least here in the UK, it went live on April 1st. But then it was revealed that TFE was being proposed by Will Duffy, who I was partly familiar with already. He'd appeared in a discussion with Austin Whitsitt over on Jaren's channel back in January, and I'd actually published a video relating to part of that discussion regarding southern flight routes, which I'd published that video back in early March, before I even knew anything about the existence of TFE. And it was also detailed that what Will was proposing was that he was going to pay for one person from each side to join him on a trip out there, which did still seem slightly far-fetched of an idea, considering it would be costing him north of $100,000, but it's certainly more reasonable than paying for 48 people. Now, when I was then offered one of the paid places on the trip, my feelings were actually somewhat mixed. There was the obvious excitement about such an incredible opportunity. Antarctica is a place that most people don't get the chance to visit, mainly due to the cost. So for me, this is probably a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to do something that relatively few people get the chance to do. But I also had some reservations about it as well. This is not just a 4-day trip to Antarctica. We're due to fly from Punta Arenas in Chile on the 14th of December and fly back there on the 18th. However, those dates are very weather dependent. ALE, the company who's sorting the whole trip, have many trips to Antarctica, 18 of them currently listed on their website, all at various dates from late November through to January, all of them flying from Punta Arenas. So when we fly out to Antarctica, there will actually already be people who are on other trips ready to fly back. And obviously, the plane needs acceptable weather conditions to land and take off at the airstrip in Antarctica. So they will take off from Punta Arenas when they are happy that 4 hours later, when we're due to land in Antarctica, the weather will be good enough for the plane to land, offload all of us, load up the people waiting to leave, and take back off again. Otherwise, they'd run the risk of being left with a grounded aircraft and potentially more people at the camp than they can handle. So, depending on the weather forecast, they could potentially end up bringing forward the flight out and/or delaying the return flight at the end of the trip. As such, ALE tell us to factor in a few days either side staying in Punta Arenas. Add to that the fact that to get to and from Punta Arenas from here in the UK involves multiple flights and is more or less a full 24 hours of travelling each way. So actually, I will end up being away from home and my family for some 11 days. And that's on the lead up to Christmas as well. So that is obviously makes it a very tough decision. Now, I know Simon Dan has said that that was the reason that he would never have accepted the offer had he been given it, which is entirely understandable. The trip also happens to coincide with my cousin's wedding, which was another factor for me, and at that point I still wasn't actually entirely convinced that the trip would go ahead. I genuinely didn't think any flat earthers would commit to going, and if no flat earthers were going, would the trip still actually happen? And if it did, would it change anyone's minds? Well, when the details of TFE first came to light, like I say, I didn't think any flat earthers would commit to going, and I wasn't convinced that it would actually make any difference to the argument anyway. I thought it quite likely that they would just make some excuses for not going and then just ignore it and then dismiss any future footage showing the 24-hour sun and say it was just faked or edited in some way, just as they've been doing for years already. And at the time of my last update, no flat earthers had actually committed to going. Dave Weiss had been offered a place and he turned it down. That offer subsequently was passed on to Jaren, who wasn't opposed to going but didn't want to be the only flat earther going because he felt that he could then potentially be tricked in some way. So he wanted another flat earther to go to verify what he was seeing. Will subsequently offered to pay for Austin Whitsitt to go as well, but at that point when I did the last update, he hadn't accepted. There were several issues that they'd had regarding what was being offered, and when one problem was seemingly resolved, another one would appear. And it got to a point where personally, I wasn't convinced that they were going to accept. From what I was hearing, it sounded to me like they were almost looking for problems until they found one that couldn't be resolved, so that then they had a way of not going without actually publicly rejecting it. However, I'm happy to say that I was wrong. Both Jaren and Austin eventually accepted the terms. Both of them and myself have all signed an agreement with Will committing ourselves to going, and that if we back out for any reason that is within our control, i.e. we just decide we now don't want to go, we'll have to reimburse Will the full $35,000 or so that he's paid towards our trip. So at that point, any lingering concerns I had about the trip not going ahead were well and truly extinguished. And I have to say that even before going, the effect that TFE has had on this whole debate has been much greater than I ever expected the end result to be. I thought flat earthers would basically just stay quiet on the topic, maybe hope that it just went away and never actually happened, and that then, as I mentioned, that they just dismiss any resulting footage as being faked. But that's not what has happened. Instead, it seems to have turned flat earthers inwards on themselves, with them proactively making multiple videos each, trying to come up with many excuses as possible why a 24-hour sun wouldn't disprove the Earth being flat, which I find incredible. To be proactively trying to head off a 24-hour sun months before we've even gone, to me speaks volumes about how little confidence they have in their own ideas. Many of them now outright stating they don't have a flat Earth model, or that seeing lights in the sky doesn't prove the shape of the Earth, which I find hilarious. The very same people who have said in the past that Antarctica and a 24-hour sun wouldn't work on a flat Earth, who'll use geometry-based arguments, such as the geometric horizon can be no further than 1.22 times the square root of the observer's height in feet away, and so therefore, if we see something beyond that distance, it disproves the globe. We're now presented with the challenge of showing a geometry-based argument that can explain a 24-hour sun remaining the same angular size and circling 360 degrees around an observer in Antarctica, just as it does in the Arctic, on anything other than a globe, now claim it's an irrelevant argument and doesn't prove anything. Although credit where it is due, not all flat earthers have been behaving like this. As I say, Jaron and Austin have both agreed to go and see for themselves, and both have maintained that a circling 24-hour sun would be a big problem for the idea of the Earth being flat.
So people can say, oh, the lights in the sky don't prove anything. Say whatever you want. That is definitive to me. I'm just saying my own opinion that this is something I've claimed does not happen, that it does not happen, that there is no 24-hour sun. And the reason we've made that claim is because it doesn't work on this model.
But the reaction from others towards them was quite incredible. People weren't just disagreeing with Jaron and Austin on it. There were many people from their own side turning against them, trying to ostracize them, claiming they were never true flat earthers and that they were just plants put there by the globe side to reinforce some lie about what the sun does. Which I have to say would have been some serious commitment to the cause, given the number of years that both of them have spent creating videos and having debates in favour of flat Earth. And several individuals actually offered to pay for other flat earthers to join us and see for themselves, and whilst most rejected, one offer did lead to a golden ticket event, which some 40-odd flat earthers entered in the hope of being able to go. Unfortunately, it transpired that that offer wasn't genuine, and it was instead a flat earther pulling a prank. But the eventual winner, Lisbeth Acosta, has now had her ticket paid for in full by another individual. So currently there are 3 flat earthers confirmed going. Alex Stein has an offer pending from Tim Poole.
There's supposedly a 24-hour sun in the North Pole, but they're doing an experiment on December 18th. If there's a 24-hour sun in Antarctica, it proves the shape of the Earth. I know it sounds crazy, but you have to send me to Antarctica.
Yeah, we should live stream
You said that, so...
Okay.
Are you going to send me there?
Yes.
Okay. Well, we're going to Antarctica to prove the shape of the Earth now.
Although he's since gone very quiet on the topic, so I don't hold much hope of him going, even though it was him that brought it up to Tim in the first place. Who else? Fellow debunkers MC Toon and Critical Think, who are both going through a combination of crowdfunding as well as their own money. Someone offered to pay for Candace Owens to join us after she'd started talking about the possibility of the Earth being flat. And while she's personally said she won't go, she's been very positive about the idea of the trip, and her show's director, Mark Herman, will be going in her place, and so she'll presumably then be talking about the topic at a later date. So there are quite a few of us going, and TFE has certainly had more of an impact on the discussion than I was expecting. In fact, it's already seemingly started to impact some people's opinions. The reaction from prominent flat earthers has not gone unnoticed. Will recently interviewed a now ex-flat earther, Amarel, who'd been a long-time Patreon supporter of Eric Dubé, someone who for years has been claiming that they want to go to Antarctica and claiming there would not be a 24-hour sun there because the Earth is flat.
Depending how far south the observer is, the sun should be seen for several days or weeks, never fully setting, just like it does in the north. In reality, however, there is never 24-hour sunlight anywhere in Antarctica at any time of year.
Yet, when offered an all-expenses-paid trip to go for themselves, Amarel messaged Dubé excited about the prospect that he'd be going and being able to show the world the truth, and was somewhat bewildered when Dubé shut down the idea and flipped his stance to say that a 24-hour sun could happen on a flat Earth and that the whole thing was irrelevant.
You saw the experiment, you were like, this is exciting, and then you immediately reach out to Dubé. You're expecting he's going to be excited like you. So how did he respond?
He said, I don't share your enthusiasm about this final experiment.
He said it's a straw man. And he said, and then he started saying like weird stuff. Like he said, even if there is a 24-hour sun in Antarctica, it might be a second sun, or it might be a sun simulator. And when I read that, I was just like, oh. And I couldn't even respond. I couldn't even bring myself to respond. I just unsubscribed from his Patreon, and
which has now seemingly caused Amaral to drop Flat Earth altogether. So, anyway, my position currently is I've had confirmation from ALE that my place on the trip is now paid in full. They've sent me a packing list of all the gear that I'll need to bring, most of which I've already bought, but there are a few last bits that I still need to pick up. Will has sorted my medical evacuation insurance, which I've had the details for. The hotels in Punta Arenas are sorted. My flights are all now booked and paid for. I've even upgraded the flights out of my own pocket because A, they are some long-ass flights to be on, so I'd prefer to make sure that I'm comfy and can get some sleep. And B, upgrading the seats also increases my luggage allowance, which I wanted for peace of mind, because as you'll see in the future video, I've got quite a lot of photography gear to pack. So, I'm definitely feeling excitement about the trip as it draws closer. However, there is also elements of nerves as well. Not nerves in the sense that I might wind up watching the sun set and proving the Earth is flat. I'm pretty confident that the sun isn't going to set. I've spoken to numerous people who've been to Antarctica in December and even captured the 24-hour sun. ALE themselves are making special arrangements for us regarding it, because one of the people going, I think it was Critical Think, actually emailed ALE to ask them outright, do we get an unobstructed 24-hour view of the sun from the Union Glacier camp? And it turns out that where the camp is located, there's a large mountain nearby that for a brief period during the early hours of the morning, the sun passes behind. It doesn't set, it's just obstructed from view. So the owner of ALE has actually been in touch and said they have a sheltered location a few kilometers away from the main camp, which has an unobstructed 24-hour view of the sun, which they will take us to and provide a generator for us there as well to be able to power the cameras and such. So I highly doubt they would agree to all of that if the sun was actually going to set. So I'm not nervous about what we'll see. It's more nerves as in pressure. I mean, it's potentially very harsh climate that we'll be in. The conditions are much colder than anything that I've personally photographed in for long periods of time. So it's rather an unknown as to how well all of my gear is going to hold up. It should be fine, but I won't know for sure until I'm there. By which point, if it's not, it's kind of too late to do anything about it. And I also feel there's an expectation there for me to get great footage given my photography background. I've seen quite a lot of people commenting along the lines that I'm probably the best choice for going on the trip because I'm a photographer. So there is some pressure there on me to make sure that I deliver the results that people expect. Although, to be clear, that's common for me. Anytime I'm preparing to go and photograph a wedding, for example, I have the same feelings prior to it, because I know I have only one chance to get things right. And if I forget to take something with me on the day or I overlook a detail, I'm then left to deal with that as best as I can. And the good thing is that we'll at least be there for a few days, so that increases the chances of being able to get good results. And between all of us going, we're trying to cover as many bases as possible. Lots of us are taking cameras. Will has bought a Starlink package for us with the hope of being able to do a live stream while we're there. Although currently we're unsure about how much bandwidth we'll have available. Plus there's then the power considerations as well. So I'm sure once we're there, everything will be fine and we'll be able to work through any problems. But there is some pre-trip nerves whilst we're trying to preempt all these different possibilities. And I also feel it's best to err on the side of caution with things. Like I said, we're going to an environment that is much harsher than anything that I'm used to dealing with. Obviously, at the camp, we have the support of the staff there to help us. All of our gear is in the tent. So, if I then set up some of my gear to try and record some stuff and find 20 minutes later that my camera's not working properly and I need some other bits, it's a quick walk back to the tent to get them. Whereas if we're a few kilometers away at the shelter and I find there's bits I need back at the tent, I'm kind of screwed. So I think my plan will be that once we get to the camp, that first period there, just get acclimatized with the setup of the place, get my stuff in the tent, etc. And then maybe rather than aiming to get straight out to the shelter, I think it might be best if I spend that first evening just testing my gear out at the camp to see how it handles the cold conditions and iron out any issues, get some sleep, and then aim to go to the shelter the following day. Again, it's all sort of an unknown until I actually get there. Hence, the emotions are somewhat a mix of a lot of excitement, but some side orders of nerves and uncertainty. But that's pretty much the state of play at the moment. The trip is definitely going ahead. All of the logistic sides of things are sorted. I've got a few last bits of gear to sort out, and once I've got those together, I'll aim to put another video out going over all of that. So if there's anything else you guys would like to know about the trip, drop a comment down below and I'll try and cover as many of them as possible in that future video. If you're interested in seeing those videos and the results of the trip, and you haven't already done so, then please consider hitting the like and subscribe buttons, and hopefully we'll see you in the next video.